Welcome to the Trump Tater podcast. With me today is Burgess Owens, running for the 4th Congressional District. Is that right?
Absolutely, and looking forward to it, Jamie, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, the Trump Tater wants to know a little bit about you. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
For sure. Well, I grew up in the Deep South in the 60s in Tallahassee, Florida. Very fortunate, to be honest with you, to grow up in an environment that was very inclusive. And when I say that, it was segregation, Jim Crow, KKK, but the community I grew up in was extremely positive because we had bought on to education and a very strong Christian base and entrepreneurship and respect for God, for country, and family. So it was a really good place to grow up in. I left high school there to go to the University of Miami, where I got a biology degree, and at the same time I played football with the University of Miami before they started winning a lot of football games, way before they got to be the U. Mm-hmm. And left from there to go to the Jets, played there for 7 years. And my last 3 years with the Raiders, and where I won a SuperBowl Championship when the Raiders used to win football games. So I did that, retired from the NFL, and for 25 years was in the corporate account arena as a corporate account sales rep. So I did that and raised 6 kids on the East Coast, and about maybe almost 8 years ago, decided to move here to Utah because all my kids were here after going to school in this area. And it's just been the greatest move I've ever made. Love the area, love the values, and that's actually one of the reasons I'm running for Congress right now for the 4th District, because the values I grew up in back home in Tallahassee are the same values we have here, and I want to make sure we keep that.
Awesome. Do all your children live here still then?
All 6 kids and all 14 grands. So it's a good place for me. It's truly home for sure.
Well, awesome. Well, we're excited to have you on the Trump Tater podcast. And
well, let me ask you now. Tell me a little bit of what the Trump Tater is all about. This is kind of new to me, so just help me understand
okay.
that a little bit.
So, I own a baked potato restaurant in downtown Ogden, and so when Trump was running, some people suggested he might look like a potato. And so initially, I was going to do a contest on that and have people draw Trump as a potato, and then the election got a little crazy, and I decided I better not do that. But that's not an insult to me because I love potatoes. Mm-hmm. And I love Trump. So anyway, after he was elected, people were calling him a Trump Tater, like a dictator. And I thought I can do something with that. And I thought went through a few artists and came up with the Trump Tater. But then I thought, what does a Trump Tater really mean? So I looked up Trump in the dictionary, and Trump means to outclass, outshine, and outperform someone or something. It also means a dependable and exemplary person. And I thought, and so anything you end with Tater means the attributes of the word before, and like Terminator or Dictator, but Trump Tater. So I'm trying to change the definition of what a Trump Tater is out there, because this is the real definition. It's someone who outclasses, outshines, and outperforms.
Okay.
And so our motto, and we'll say it at the end, but I'll fill you in, is be a tater and not a hater.
There we go. I like that.
So anyway, this is our fun pro-Trump character. You know, you had the Trump baby out there and the Trump chicken. So I wanted to have a pro-Trump character, and we've had him in parades. The kids love him. We've had him in the mascot halftime at Weber State University. And again, he's just really been embraced by especially young kids. They love the Trump Tater. Santa Claus was right behind us, and he kind of took Santa Claus's thunder.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to this. Absolutely. Spending time answering questions, and of course, with the Trump Tater being with us, it's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to it.
Anyway, part of it is, bringing some fun back to the politics, because we've been so serious, and politics has been so divisive that I thought, we need a little humor. And so that's kind of where it started from. But so I have my first question, or I should say the Trump Tater's first question. And I'm going to kind of tell you what my view on this question is, and you can tell me if you agree with me or not.
I like that.
But
Here you go.
Let me see, Trump Tater, you got your hand over here?
Can you see it there?
Okay, what should be the Republican Party's #1 goal in 2020? So this has been a passion of mine for 20 years now. And I feel the #1 goal for the Republican Party should be outreach to Black Americans. Black Americans vote 10% Republican, 90% Democrat. And this disparity in voting has created a vacuum, for one, on everything that we try to do is framed around race. Yeah. And so the media can do that. 2, it's just the right thing to do, because the Republican Party was the home of Black Americans since Reconstruction, and then somewhere along the line we lost our view, we lost our vision, and we lost the black vote. And some of it we honestly lost, and other parts the media misconstrued it. So, but regardless of how it happened, it should be our goal as the Republican Party to change that demographic and make it more like 35–40% Republican, eventually majority Republican, but you know, we got to work our way. And I see this for another reason too. It empowers the black vote. Blacks make up 13% of the American population. Changing a 30-point swing changes elections, and because the 4-point swing changes elections, and with that empowerment, the Democrats have taken it for granted, their vote for granted for a long time. And I see that they don't have to commit to stay Republican, but to make the vote fluid. So that, anyway, to me, that should be the #1 goal.
I like that. And basically, you just described political free agency, and I agree with that. In terms of the message of the Republican Party, that hasn't really changed. It's just a matter of getting the message to those who have, in my mind, have been, there's been a propaganda that's been very, very effective by the left. They've done it very well for a long, long time. And I think the key to this particular campaign is putting out a message that's so simple to understand that we can really have something to talk about. What Americans do best is when we communicate, even if we're not on the same page, even if we're not going to agree on everything, as long as we have the same end game. And this end game should be our kids, our culture, the people themselves, and let's come together and actually have a chance to communicate and work together. So those are things that we need to get tied in. To do that, my campaign has four basic tenets that allows us to have conversations about those issues that really bring us together. It also defines those that hate our nation, because there's an ideology of socialism and Marxism that's always been anti-American. It's always been there. I think now we have a chance to point to just how simple it is to recognize it, and recognize also how evil how evil that is. So those 4 tenets basically is this: is head, heart, hands, and home. It's being sure we're educating ourselves. God should be, and faith should be part of every part of our society. There should be no place that faith should not be allowed. Industry, I think we're all recognizing the power of our American country. We are people of work, of productivity, of meritocracy. That's who we are by our nature. And the minute we're told not to do that, we actually go crazy. We go nuts. So we need to understand that piece of meritocracy has to be there, opportunity for every man, woman, and teenager to go out and go to work and produce, get their self-esteem. And the last one is family. As our nation goes, as our family goes, so is our nation. Our family unit has been the first thing that the left has been attacking. It's been for decades, and it comes down to very simply: if we get our young men to recognize their priorities and where their respect should be, and it's first God, it's second womanhood. Once our young men understand that that is their responsibility to respect God and their womanhood, then they'll get the respect of others around us. And this comes down to this for women, for young ladies, because if they understand that they are truly the foundation of our nation, that's where compassion comes from, that's where the true love of Christ, if we're ever going to see it in this lifetime, is through womanhood. They raise our kids, they teach them how to serve, and all those good things. So it's up to manhood, to protect that and to respect that. Once we get back to those tenets, in which ladies are also keeping their standards high, then our young men, because they want that respect, will make sure they also work to gain that respect. So those are the 4 tenets. Those are opportunities for us to talk together. What you'll see on the other side, the left hates education. All you have to do is go to any place that they have a control over. The state of California is a good example. We have 75% of the black boys in the state of California cannot pass standard reading and writing tests. Now this is 2017. That should be an outrage to every American who cares about our future, that many Americans cannot read and write, cannot think, cannot develop a relationship with God because they can't read the Bible, they can't read any scriptures, and they wait to listen to BET, Black Entertainment Television, in terms of how their view of life should be. So we need to make sure that we don't continue to allow out the leftists to do that to our kids, to educate them or to send them out to a college, prepared for life, excited about our country, and they come back as little Marxists. We cannot allow that to happen anymore. We cannot also allow the leftists to take away the opportunity for us to worship, to have our faith. You take away God, you have nothing but evil left. And that's what we see on the left with Marxism and socialism. And of course, everything else, the working and family unit. So those are the things we need to do. I think once we do that, conversation will be much, much easier for us. Even if we don't agree on every single piece of it, we know the end game will be the same. And most importantly, we as a country, as Americans, will finally recognize who our enemy is. And it's not each other. It's those on the left that adhere to the godless ideologies of socialism and Marxism.
Awesome. Well, that's
Thank
another
you.
question
Thank
that
you.
Trump Tater
Trump
had,
Tater.
is talking about Common Core. We feel like it's been a disaster. What are your views on Common Core?
Well, very simply, our country is defined by life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And we can talk about life a little bit later on, but liberty comes down to a couple things. First of all, it was Thomas Edison that said very simply, ignorance and free can never be. If we do not allow our prodigy, our kids, ourselves to be educated, to be able to think, critical thinking skills, then we're going to lose our freedom. Common Core is something that should never, ever happen, where people in D.C. are deciding what we should be teaching our kids. We the people, the most powerful words in the history of mankind, means that we literally have control of our future, our kids, our businesses, our family. All those things that come down to what makes us happy should be decided by we the people, not by people in D.C. who have an agenda. Again, I just talked about the state of California. That's a good example of what happens with leftists in control from D.C. and in control of a system. So let's make sure that my goal with education, very simply, is to bring it all back home. Decisions should be made here, where moms and dads can sit down with teachers, figure out what the best course for their kids, what makes them happy, what their talents might be, and they can choose the best school for them based on that conversation. We should not ever be allowing the leftists to have people not be able to get educated because of the zip code they live in. And that's basically what the left has done when they take away the option for parents to leave a bad school, a failing school, to go to a better one because of choice. It's because they don't want them to have those choices of improving and understanding the American way. So yeah, we need to bring that back. And with that, I think we should also bring back teaching about our culture, our country, what we the people have done together. That's been a big hole in our society of knowing what made us so great. And the more we know about our history, the more we can come together as a people and move forward with that.
Okay, awesome. Well, speaking of our history, let me see, I think I'll kind of tell you a little bit. I am from the South as well. So I'd like to talk about the South and the Confederate flag just briefly. I lived in South Carolina 20 years ago. And there was a Republican governor at the time, David Beasley, and he attempted to take down the Confederate flag during his first term in office. And he ended up losing the election because of that. And so Jim Hodges, a Democrat, gets elected. And my husband's military, and so I decided, hey, I had 3 young kids, and I decided I'd go down there and volunteer some time to this cause because it didn't represent who I was. And so I went 3 times to the NAACP and asked them, can I help with this cause? They never called me back. Never called me back. So I went again, and Dwight James at the time was, and he actually just retired this year from this position as the head of the NAACP there. And he said, well, nobody's working on that right now. I thought, well, how can nobody be working on that when this whole election was about the Confederate flag that got David Beasley out of office? I said, how can we not be working on that? So I found out that Governor Hodges, the Democrat, had made promises to the CCC and other pro-flag groups that he would not bring up the Confederate flag if he got elected. And he had also made agreements with the NAACP and some black legislators that they wouldn't bring it up his first term in office. So here I am, I'm out on this limb going, I would like to help with this cause. And then there's no cause to help with. So I went to the library and I did research for about 3 months. Yeah. Because I asked him too, I said, well, do you have some history for me on what efforts have been made in this area? He said, no, supposedly some fire had happened and he didn't have the background to give me any background. So after about 3 months of doing some research, I put together a couple of packets and I started lobbying different legislators in South Carolina. And I started building a coalition. And it's called 2 Flags in 2000. And so my goal was only the sovereign flags of South Carolina and the United States should fly in official capacity. At that time, I don't know if you're aware, but the Confederate flag flew in the House and the Senate chambers as well as on the Dome. So it started flying in the House in 1939 in direct opposition, and no fanfare was made on when they went up. But going back and looking through different documentation, when a federal anti-lynching bill was passed, it went up in the House. And that House member then became a Senate member. And when Brown versus Board of Education was passed in 1954, then some more talk happened, and then the flag went up in the Senate chambers in 1956. Same year that Georgia changed their state flag and incorporated the Confederate battle flag into their flag. So direct opposition to Brown versus Board of Education. Then in 1961, under Fritz Hollings, who was a Democratic governor, became a Democratic senator, put it on the dome. And direct opposition basically to the Civil Rights Movement. They said it was in the anniversary of the 100th celebration of the Civil War, but not a good reason to be putting it up on the dome, but it never came down, and it became in direct opposition to the Civil Rights Movement. So, and again, I'm from the South, but after reading the history, there was no heritage. Even the sons and daughters of the Confederacy tried to petition for the flag not to be used in that way, that it would bring dishonor to their heritage.
Yep.
And so recently, 5 years ago, unfortunately a bad compromise was made, and it went on the Confederate monument outside of the dome. But it used to fly, for anybody who doesn't understand, 20 years ago, it flew on the dome and in the House and Senate chambers in an official capacity. So it went on the Confederate monument, and 5 years ago is when all the ramblings again happened, and Nikki Haley finally took it off as governor off the Confederate monument. So that's where my passion for this has came, for outreach. Because to me, as a Republican, I was conservative back then. I thought, why aren't more blacks voting Republican? We're the party of Lincoln, and we've had a higher percentage of Republicans that voted for the Civil Rights Amendment and Voting Rights Act. And so at that time became my passion to change that vote. And to be honest with you, though, it's been a frustrating battle. Not because I don't feel Republicans feel that way, but they just felt that it wasn't ever going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so they never put the time into it and the money into it. I was like, we got to advertise on black radio, we got to advertise in black media. And a lot of places, maybe not here in Utah, but a lot of places have specific black media, black radio, black newspapers. And I thought, we've got to advertise. And we've got, it's not going to pay off for a while, but if we do it over time, it will change. Yeah. So I have to say, Trump has been the most incredible. He's called all kinds of racist names and everything else, but he's the first Republican, actually since Jack Kemp. Jack Kemp reached out to black Americans back in the late 1980s, but first Republican to actively reach out and ask for the black vote. So what are your thoughts on Trump?
First of all, I appreciate Pastor James. Thank you so much for a little bit of history, because that does kind of give some context of what I'll be saying. I grew up in the Deep South in Tallahassee. I grew up in a very proud community. I do remember the emotions, though, at that time we were just integrating the community. I grew up in a very similar to the movie Remember the Titans. That was kind of the environment I grew up in. The first 4 blacks on this once all-white high school. And at that time, the flag was used as a way to intimidate or to bully to a degree. I want to separate the flag from the Confederate heritage, because what that part of that time of our country came down to was our country understanding, first of all, getting rid of an evil, and for the first time, many people had a chance to start looking at each other quite differently. And I bring that to a point by talking about Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington, because I want people to understand that we the people have done great things together, no matter whether we're north, south, east, or west. There's always been bad, there'll always be evil, but there's always good people there also, all across our country. Booker T. Washington had developed Tuskegee Institute down in Tuskegee, Alabama, the very, very deep south. And in 1982, by 1905, it was producing more self-made millionaires than Harvard, Yale, and Princeton combined. Who supported him during that time were former Confederate soldiers. People who had gone through that war, had realized that there was a people they really didn't know about, and they had so much respect for what Booker T. was doing, and they gained so much honor for what he was accomplishing, that they actually donated buildings, they gave money to Tuskegee. They were proud of what Tuskegee had actually done, had parades in which they participated with black Americans, because they were very proud of what that institution was doing to that part of the country. It was because of what Booker T. Washington did that when the a cotton plague came in, that wiped out it was a boll weevil that knocked out the cotton industry. It was Booker T. Washington went throughout the country, throughout that part of the South, talking to black and white farmers about how to have alternate seasons and alternate planting crops. So there was a connection between white Americans and black Americans that was increasing and becoming much better until you had those who brought the hate piece of it in. And unfortunately, they also used the Confederate flag as their message, because it was a KKK that really, again, used that flag to use it to intimidate. So I think at this point, there's two parts to this. We need to make sure that we never ever lose our history, never lose an idea of what we did as a people, good and the bad, to recognize that even on the Confederate side, they was fighting against freedom of black Americans. They were later on, people had changed, because what Americans do, they changed to where they were very pro black Americans, doing everything they could to do to help that race to continue to move forward. When I think about my great-great-grandfather, Silas Burgess, when he escaped out of North Carolina, South Carolina, and made his track down south and out west, the Underground Railroad. It was done. The Underground Railroad was facilitated by white and Mexican Americans. Again, they had the heart and they had the Christian base that impacted my great-great-grandfather for his life and beyond. So to answer your question, there's two pieces. Let's make sure we don't forget our history. Let's not tear down monuments, because that does not change our history. We just need to understand and learn about it, and also learn that there were good people that were actually, as we grew up, began to really have a great impact on the black race as they began to understand the mistakes they had made. This country is one in which every American has a chance to have a second chance. And I've seen that in my life personally by people, young men that we used to fight 50 years ago on the football field because we didn't know each other. We're just getting a chance to know each other, who are now some of my very best friends on Facebook because we grew up. We recognized that we were fighting the message of our fathers, and we finally got over it. And that's what Americans do, generation after generation. So let's never ever forget through our history that we always work to find our better selves. That's what makes us so unique. And if we lose our history and lose the ideas of what we did to get there, we'll never really appreciate where we're heading off to, appreciate where we are today, or the vision that we can have as we move together and work together in time.
That kind of takes me on to another subject of Charlottesville a couple years ago, because it was all about the General Lee Monument and taking the General Lee Monument down. I'm, for one, actually for some type of a commission made up of people on all sides to decide what monuments might want to stay, because there probably are some Confederate monuments that should go.
Can I talk to that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. But I don't think General Lee's one of those. But
let's not destroy our history. No, once we start down that path, we never know where it's going to go. And the problem is that the leftists play chess while we play checkers. We can have that conversation, think it was fair. History is history. Let's learn from it. Let's talk. Let's go to where we understand what's going on with it. Let's not destroy history, because that's where we begin. We always continue to step on that process and move forward. And the minute we start having conversations about what should go and what should stay, believe me, we lose that battle. We gain pride as we understand our history and what we overcame. We accomplish appreciation by knowing that where we are today is so much further and so much better than it was before. And we develop a vision by recognizing that we the people have always just done better every single generation, and we can expect to do the same as we move forward. Once the leftists has convinced us to destroy our history, we destroy all of that. We destroy pride, appreciation, and vision. So let's not play that game, because we don't lose and we don't win in that battle. That's just like we don't play the game of let's decide which faith should be staying, which should be going. We have the opportunity to have the freedom to educate, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and education is part of that game. And education means everything that we've done, everything we've come through, allows us to have a better appreciation about what mistakes we'll never make again, and how we overcame evil when we had to come to that point. I think it's important, and let me just give some context to why I'm saying this. When I talk about how great that community was I grew up in, we were taught how to think. My dad was a college professor. He was not able, when he came out of war, he was not able to go and get his postgraduate degree in Texas because of Jim Crow laws. But that generation was so much into proving themselves and overcome those obstacles that they didn't let anything stop them. I ran across a box of letters when he passed away. He had never brought it out, never talked about this box. It was a box of letters, of rejection letters, of other white schools across the country that they had tried to get his PhD. He wanted to go get his PhD for, and they all turned him down. They turned him down because of his color. There's no question about that. But what's nice about that generation and what they did is they did not quit. He ended up getting his PhD at Ohio State in agronomy. He taught for 40 years as a college professor at Florida A&M. He was a entrepreneur, a researcher. 5 years old, I lived in Liberia, Africa, because he was doing research over there at that time. And my uncle was there at the same time. He had a PhD in economics. It was a race that really represented what all cultures were doing across this country. And this is what we have to understand, that coming to America was all about the process of assimilation. And everybody went through the same process. I don't care if it was Jewish, German, Irish, whatever, it didn't matter. We all came here, and we all started initially building our own little communities. Eventually, we got to the point we came together and started recognizing we were truly Americans, and we began to purposely find out the best talents we can find, and we associate with those we want to associate with. That's why we're not now a very diverse society. But it got there starting off with those who understood their culture. They wanted to make sure their kids had a great education. They wanted to experience the American dream, which is get into the middle class. I'm saying that because one of the things that the left loves to do is make one race feel like they are so oppressive that nobody can overcome them, and the other race so hapless and hopeless that they can never overcome the oppressor. We cannot allow the left to do that, guys. If I can say this, learn your history. Black and white Americans, learn your history. Be proud of your ancestors. Don't let people tell you that you should be ashamed of anything that your ancestors did. They got us here to where we are today. They paid the price. Nobody starts off perfect. Nobody ends up perfect. We just do our very best to move along, get our country moving in the right way. So, yes, we had imperfect ancestors, and guess what? We're imperfect ourselves today. What gets me are those who continue to point fingers at those in the past as if they today are the best judge of ever, and they're messing up everything they can possibly think about messing up. So let's make sure that as white Americans, do not apologize for you, your history, your ancestors. They did the best they can do with the circumstance they were in, and they gave us this country as the freest in the history of mankind. But black Americans, do not allow people to put our race down. Part of my message is that I came from a community, I know what it is to overcome, because we were taught that. I came from a community that was taught about patriotism, entrepreneurship, family values, getting educated, all those things that made the community I grew up in one of the best. By the way, 1940s, 50s, and 60s, things you've never been told because history has been taken from us. 1940s, 50s, and 60s, it was the black community that led our country in the growth of the middle class. Men matriculated from college, men committed to marriage over 70%, and a percentage of entrepreneurs over 40%. We had the greatest, the fastest growing middle class in our country. I was part of it. My relatives across the country were part of it. And it's very simply this: when you're a segregated community and everything is going back in it, it means the money stays there for a year and a half. It means that those who are succeeding, they put their time and energy back in mentoring the kids coming through. And most importantly, those that are trying to get to the middle class have examples of what it takes. They realize that if that guy can do it, I can do it. So you have a shifting of people that were poor to becoming middle class because of examples of what it took to get there. And those that are middle class saying, come on, this is what it takes to get there. So let's make sure we're careful about the underlying message of the left. They hate our country, which means they hate Americans. And they'll give you a message every single chance they get that we should be ashamed of it, we should be angry at other people, and that's not the American way. We understand that we can always become better by just focusing on head, heart, hands, and home. Education, God, industry, and family. And we come together with that to build a better country from generation to generation.
Awesome. Before we leave this subject, let's talk about Charlottesville just for a second, because Charlottesville, to me, has been very misrepresentative what happened. there were good people and there were some very bad people on both sides. Because in South Carolina, when I went about, as I said, lobbying the legislature, if you take, and blacks make up about 60% of the Democratic Party in South Carolina. So if I took the black legislators out of the Democratic Party and looked at just the Caucasians, there was the same percentage of white Caucasians as white Republicans that wanted the flag to stay. So there was no difference at all on that, but they would have you think it's more of a Republican issue. There was a lot of Republicans that wanted the flag down for multiple reasons, some more honorable than others, but business was a factor of that. So the good people that I did meet, it was, you know, a lot of about their heritage. A majority of the people who fought in the Civil War did not own slaves, were not plantation owners, and not saying the war was definitely, so nobody misconstrues this, was about slavery, but just like the war in Iraq's about oil, we made it about something else. So the people, we get sold a bill of goods oftentimes on why we're going to war. So their heritage, they knew their family didn't own slaves and weren't plantation owners, so they held on to their heritage. They felt that they were fighting for something honorable in states' rights, not an oppressive government like they came from in Europe. I'm not saying that they were right. I'm just saying I got to know. I got to know how they felt, and so in this they came out to support General Lee's monument. But another group that seldom gets talked about in the media is Antifa. And Antifa is a communist-based group, and communism, as we know, killed a lot more people than the Nazis ever did. Both equally horrible groups. But so Antifa, this group that had came in and kind of laid under the radar because the media would never report on them, instigated a lot of what happened in Charlottesville. So Trump, when he made his comment, there was very good people and bad people on both sides, was accurate. But yet we have our Senator Mitt Romney here that immediately tried to shoot down Trump and say there's not a moral equivalent. So what do you have to say about Charlottesville and what took place there?
Well, let me just, I guess, this kind of lay a foundation that people need to understand about the greatest threat that we had as a nation, as a people, and this now as a nation. I went through that little history about the black community because I think it's important for all Americans to recognize that any people, any culture is given an opportunity to focus on those four tenets I mentioned will become eventually part of the middle class. They'll experience the American way. And our greatest enemy, those that really undermined everything that we were all about, were not white supremacists. They were black elitists. You see, you have to understand that elitism is a problem no matter what party, what race, what community. Because elitism, which basically that's why they kind of gravitate to Marxism, being Marxists and socialists, is because it's all about themselves, all about power. And they look at their power and their prestige and their themselves more than anything else. So that's actually been the greatest damage to my community, of those who look like me, who say they love us, and they do everything they can to put in policies that keep us poor, hopeless, and hapless because it gives them power. Now, I just want to make that point because that's going to go across the line. We have to be sure to identify elitism, no matter where it is. And all you have to do is see who cares truly about God, family, and country. Who really truly cares about those four tenets that goes for every single culture, no matter where it is, or who votes against them. And unfortunately, my community has been black politicians that's voted against education, faith, industry, and family. And that's why we have the mess we have now in our community, which we're changing. We're changing that around. In terms of what happened in Charlottesville, understand the left. When you have no God, you can say anything with no shame. It doesn't matter. The end game is the bottom line. And yes, there were people there strictly for the idea they wanted to keep their history. They didn't want the statues being torn down because of political correct. And there are people on both sides of that issue. But you're right. You have people that are haters that are haters on both sides. And those haters who's got the biggest attention. And the haters that I've seen happening, and I call them bullies and cowards, are people like Antifa. The fact is, they're no different than KKK. They show up because they're cowards and they're bullies. They show up hidden. You can't see their face, and they come up in gangs. They love being together in gangs when nobody can identify who they are. Understand that's what a coward does. And the only way you can actually fight that is, first of all, strip away the opportunity for people to hide themselves. And that comes in not only in the physical way of Antifa and KKK, but in our government. We cannot allow bureaucrats to hide behind titles to attack the American people, like we've seen over the last 3 years. We have the FBI, the DOJ, you have IRS that literally is going after a group of people because they don't agree with their ideology. Why do they do it? Because nobody knows who they are. They burrow real deep into their jobs, and they can make deals, they can make decisions, and none of us will ever find out who they are. And they'll go off eventually and retire in a great, whatever, retiring and walking in the sunset because nobody ever knew who they were. We also find them in our colleges. Yep. Where the left loves to hide is in the soft underbelly. They hide where nobody can touch them. So you have these Marxists, these bullies and coward professors who go into the arena because it's safe. They go there because they get tenure and nobody's going to fire them. They can bully our kids to believe in a certain way. We look at entertainment, where you have people hiding behind things like BET, Black Entertainment Television. And many of you guys might not know about Black Entertainment Television. I happen to know about them, and I have for years, because that is basically the conduit in which the white organization, Viacom, who bought BET, Black Entertainment Television, about 20 years ago, and ever since then they've been sending the anti-message, anti-God, anti-family, anti-white, anti-police into the black community. If you wonder why you have so many good young men who want to do the right thing, become multimillionaires, playing on a football field, living the American dream, and cannot stand for a flag, it's because they've been getting messaging for a long, long time from these Marxists, these socialists, these cowards who hang behind corporations like Viacom, in which there's no black representation, no blacks on the board, but this messaging of black entertainment comes in and goes directly into the urban community where these kids are taught to hate our country. So I'm saying that we have to truly understand there are good people in all parties. There are good people in all cultures. And that's why those 4 tenets are so important. If we come together and talk about those 4 tenets, we can find ourselves, we can start having communication. And the most important thing, we can also identify those who hate our country. And that is the bottom line. If we understand the enemy, what Americans do best, once we know we're in a fight, we win. It's just that simple. Whether it be Pearl Harbor, whether it be 9/11, whether it be what's going on right now, where they're trying to keep our country down, where people don't have jobs because they want to bring misery once again. It comes down to very simply the left use misery as a political strategy. They have done it forever. I can tell you from my perspective as a black American who grew up in a great community and have watched what they've done to my community over the last 60 years, they're trying to do the very same thing to our country. Don't let them. Let's continue to talk. Let's continue, no matter what party you're in, focus on prioritizing head, heart, hands, and home. If we do that, and we have these conversations, you look at who's on the other side of the plate. What is the other party doing? Are they emphasizing and uplifting those of us who want head, heart, hands, and home, or are they demeaning it and taking away the dreams of millions and millions of people so they get power? That's the conversation we need to start having. And let's be honest, guys. If you love our country, you should love all Americans, no matter what zip code they live in, what color they are, what culture they are. If you truly love them and you have that empathy, you should care about head, heart, hands, and home for everybody. Okay?
Awesome. Well, that brings me to another thought. Let's see here. We're going to skip ahead a little bit.
Okay.
Because you have a pretty tough there's 4 of you in the primary, right? And one of them made it out of the caucus with you, and it's Kim Coleman.
Yes.
I see her as probably your biggest competition. But I like Kim. I like some of this. She's really stood up for free speech and everything. But again, if I was to talk to the people in your district, I'm District 1, but is that I just really feel it's important to have more conservative blacks in elected positions in our country. Now, we had Mia Love a couple of years ago. So what would you say is the difference? Trump Tater wants to know, Mia Love held the same seat 2 years ago. There we go. Can you help him on that side? There we go. And how do you feel you're different than Mia Love?
Well, I think the first thing we need to start doing is color has nothing to do with it.
No.
All right.
But for some people, they're going to be saying, well, you know.
And here's the thing, because I want to answer that. At the same time, I want to say what's really important at this point in our history, in our history of our country. What I've been so proud of as I've learned my history and I've understood the American way, is something that we do instinctively. It's just we do it, sometimes not knowing it, but collectively, we have to do the right thing at the right time for the right reasons. That's who we are as Americans. I think in 2016, that's exactly what we did. We didn't know a lot about candidate Trump. We just knew we didn't want. We just understood instinctively Marxism, socialism, and evil was not good. And so we pushed away from that, and we then have a President Trump right now that's really given us the best 3 years we've ever had in our history. No matter what the background is, what the color, race, or creed, the policies, because it's American policies, that led us to the lowest unemployment in history for blacks, Hispanics, Asians, veterans, teens, the highest percentage of 40% increase in business ownership within the first 2 years in the black community. I don't know if you know how important that is. It's all about the middle class. And if we get people in business for themselves, they will increase that middle class, increase hope. They'll also increase compassion for others and empathy. That's what happens with that very powerful middle class as business owners. What we have to also understand is that there are people in the past that have gone to office and not done what they promised to do. I think the problem with Mia, very simply, is she just lost touch. Mia did not have the energy that she could have had if she just been focused on the people here and getting feedback, those kind of things. And so what happens instinctively, we just kind of do not continue to go in that direction if we understand we have an end game. And the end game has always been, particularly in District 4, very conservatives, plus 13 Republican. We expect certain things to happen. Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness is at the core of conservatism, and we don't see that happening, we pull back. And at the same time, we had Ben McAdams making promises that he was going to be a moderate, that he was going to be the good guy, he was going to go against his party when it had to be, and we've shown that he's not kept his word with that. 90% of the times he's voted for voted for Pelosi, Schiff, Maxine Waters, and there's another one in there, AOC. That's Marxism, socialism at its worst. And we have someone here in Utah that supported that. So we have something that's a little different this time around. I would say what would be the difference in me and I would say me and any other candidate at this point. Because there's more than being a politician, guys. At this point, we need to have people that are passionate enough to understand, first of all, our enemy and to be able to speak truth to power. The greatest weapon that the left has used is calling good people names. Understand what happens with that. We as a country, we're very optimistic. We go out, we build our business, we build our family, we build a reputation over time, and we just want to be good, known to be good people. The last thing we want to do is to defend being called a racist, and the left knows that. Because how do you defend that once it's been tarred with it? So what we do as Americans, we begin to shut up. We just don't engage. We might feel a certain way, but we're not going to talk about it. We don't want people getting upset with us. And on the other side, they call blacks Uncle Toms, and it's worked for over decades. Those days are done. I've been a conservative all my life. I just talked about that. I've been a Republican since President Reagan. I've been a very passionate believer in our country, our way, and I've understood, based on my background, where the enemy has been and what they've done to my race, and I don't want ever to happen to my country. So we need to send to Congress someone not because of color, not because of the legislative time and time as a legislator, or just being conservative, because conservatism is great, but if it's just that, what separates us from the rest of the crowd? And so my message, very simply, is what separates me is not only my experience of growing up in a great community and understanding from great parents of what it is to love country, God, and family, but also recognizing that I've seen what the left has done and the damage it's done to millions of people. And I live in a district, I live in a state that has so much of the values that I grew up in, and my kids now live in the same values, and I want to make sure that we never ever lose that. So it's a very passionate thing for me. If you have a chance, matter of fact, if you want to see what speaking truth to power looks like, go to my website, burgess4utah.com, and you'll see I was speaking in front of Congress against reparation. This is before I ever thought about being a politician. I'm one of those guys who always said I would never, ever, ever be a politician. And so about a year or so ago, I was speaking against reparation. You'll see someone who's speaking against Marxists and socialists to Marxists and socialists. And that's what needs to happen right now. I think our president has done one great thing for us. The three most important words in our country is we the people, and right behind that are 9. If I can do it, you can do it. What our president has done very simply, he's shown us how a person who's not a politician, who doesn't care about fame and fortune and people liking him, but he loves our country, how much of an impact we can make. He's saying to the rest of us, you don't have to be a politician. You can just be a normal person who loves our country and make a difference. And because of that, we have more candidates across our country, like myself, who have never been a politician, don't want to go there to be a career politician. We want to go there and make a difference, come back home, and live with the consequences of what we've done. So that's what makes a difference in what I'm doing and what politicians have done before me in this district. I will say this, this district, we're blessed in this way. We're between number 1 and number 3 of must-have by both parties to win the House. In other words, the Democrats need to have this seat to keep the House. We need to have the seat to get our country back. How powerful is it for us as a district, throughout the history of this country, to be the district, to be the linchpin for the rest of our country? Because as we win this, we get the House back, we keep the Senate, we allow our president to continue to build our country and make it great again. And we can say that it was our values here in Utah that made that happen. So I'm very excited about that. I'm excited about the opportunity. I don't think anything's by accident. And I think my upbringing in Tallahassee and the growth I've seen there, my love of the country, has brought me here. And by the way, 5 of my 6 kids are in District 4. 10 of my 14 grandkids are in District 4. So I think you can see District 4 is pretty high. It is top of my list of districts to make sure stays free, great opportunities, affordable housing, great education, business opportunities, and a place that my kids could live for generations. So that's what I think makes a difference here.
Awesome. We have one more question.
Okay.
Actually, I have a dozen more questions, but we're going to
We're
wrap
running
it
out
up.
of time. Okay.
Running out of time here. So you mentioned just briefly about Black Entertainment Television and the athletes that were kneeling for the national anthem. So something I've been passionate about for a long time is prison reform.
Yes.
So I'd like to talk prison reform and how you feel about that. I mean, I love that we have a president, again, who, though he criticized people for kneeling for the national anthem, he also said, hey, bring it to me, tell me what it is, and he listened. And even though I don't think it was a mutual communication, but he didn't just say, hey, because you're kneeling, I'm not going to take care of the issue at hand. He recognized there was a great injustice, and he's tried to change that great injustice.
Yes.
So.
This country is so unique. It's nothing like it in the history of mankind. And sometimes we have to just pause for a little bit and recognize what we have here that you can find anyplace else. It's based on the Judeo-Christian values. And those values basically say this: as many times we mess up, we have a chance to start all over again. It's a country of second chances. It's always been that way. That's why people are drawn to our country from different places, because they might not have had the right chance or right experience, but they say, I can go there, I can dream big, and I can make things happen. We have to understand that when I talk about evil, there are people in this country that purposely target a race, and whether it be abortion, in which 80% of abortion centers are in the Black community, whether it be laws that are put in place that target those kids that might just be having trouble with well, first they don't have fathers because of policies they put in place before. So they're out there trying to make things happen, trying to figure it out, and they can be caught for something very minor and put away forever. That's not the American way. That's not second chances. That's a racist view by the Democratic Party about a particular race of how to get rid of a problem, how to put them away so they'll never see them again. What President Trump has done very simply, he's opened up the gateways to people who have been put away for a long, long time. We've taken so many of our young boys off the streets, out of their families, and put them in jail where they will not get any kind of reform. I work very, very closely, and I started a foundation called Second Chance for Youth, because I truly believe, unlike the left believes that these kids are trash, that throw them away and they will not be a threat. I believe those are the most precious generations that we have are those who did not have hope, but are given hope, and they really will buy into the American way. They'll be our strongest advocates. And it's because they understand what second chance looks like. They will make sure their kids will not go through the same mistakes they made. They'll also be mentors to those who want to come through and get the second chance they've gotten. So I like the fact that these promises have been made for politicians for a long time. You had a Black president that came in, President Obama, who did nothing for the Black community. We had the highest unemployment. Abortion continued to go up because he was so into abortion. Matter of fact, he was one of those guys who was for live birth abortions. For those who don't know what that means, think about this. Think about this evil. That because the baby that was not killed during abortion, he believed they should keep medical attention away until the baby finally died on his own. He was a senator in Illinois, stopping the progress of bringing medical attention to babies that were from abortions. I'm saying that because he was the first president, first couple weeks when he got in the presidency, to actually stop choice for school choice. We had over 2,000 kids, black kids, every single year. 93% rate of graduation, because they had the choice of going to a different school, and it was successful for years, and very successful, very actually accepted and excited for by Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. The first act that President Obama did was eliminate that choice. What I'm saying is that we have to understand that we truly are in a fight here, and the fight is to give our kids a second chance. Prison reform is a piece of it. What comes after that is what we do now to make sure they have jobs when they come out. What can we do to make sure we're surrounding these folks to give them a chance to think of our country in a different way, and to make sure they're not being used as fodder for the left to get more power. Unfortunately, that's what they love to do: use, abuse, and discard. We just can't allow that to happen. So I'm thankful for this. We have to make sure we're doing it in the right way so that people who truly want a chance are coming out, not those who want to take advantage of others again, because there are bad people in prison, and they need to stay exactly where they are, in prison. We need to give those who really want a second chance, really see the light. They want to make sure their life ends up being productive, not one that's been a drain of our society. Give them a chance to do so. And if we do so, those will be the ones that will appreciate it so big time and rather go out there and make a difference and really become really good Americans for us.
Awesome. You mentioned abortion, about how many abortion clinics are in black neighborhoods, but abortion as a whole, because I see prison reform a little bit different than other conservatives may, but it's been something I've been pushing for a long time, is because we're a pro-life party. We respect, we don't want abortions, or very limited if Republicans do, and we don't want our elderly with assisted suicide, and so we should value the life of those who have a chance to reform and transform their lives in prison. Also, it's cost effectively to help somebody to transform and to be out and be productive citizens. It's a fiscally responsible thing to do as well on prison reform. So anyway, that's something, and I think conservatives may be able to connect a little bit more to this, because we've seen the injustices recently in FBI and CIA and other areas where Republicans are targeted, and if you have the criminal justice system against you, there's sometimes nothing you can do about it.
Yep.
And when they can take down the most powerful, a billionaire president, and throw everything at him,
Anybody.
you know, they could do
Yep.
it to anyone. So Obama did have a chance. He had the House, the Senate, and the presidency for 2 years, and they did nothing on prison reform.
That's
So,
because President Obama was a Marxist and a socialist. He does not like our country. We have to be honest, guys. It has nothing to do with color. And I want to make this very, very clear, because at the end of the day, we should prioritize, as Martin Luther King said, content and character, not skin color. If we really understand that, we look at each other the way God does, from inside out, not outside in, then we make the right choices. We also understand that evil is also in any color. And we had a president, President Obama, that did not like our country, was using the black community. That's why the black community continued to stay miserable over 8 years. Over 8 years that he was in place, there was more welfare, more people being put in prison, more abortion. 82% of the black teen boys across our country were unemployed. 92% in the liberal city of Chicago. He never visited Chicago, even though it was a murder capital of our country. We have to recognize, and once we start looking at color as being our definer, we become racist. It's really that simple. So let's not allow the left to help us do that. Let's look at the character. Let's look at what makes us Americans. What makes us Americans is our priorities: God, family, and country. That's the priority that Americans have. And those of us who love that will come together and figure out how to make sure our communities are the very best in the world. And so let's keep that in mind. Again, I'm excited about the opportunity to give a message that I think our country really is wanting to hear. And that is, we should be proud of who we are, proud of our past, excited about our future, And let's do even better than we have done up to this point. And it's look at each other from inside out, not outside in. From someone who grew up in Deep South 50 years ago, we have done an awesome job of doing that. Look at how diverse our country is in terms of acceptance across the board. Let's not let those differences be the priority the way the left wants us to. If that happens, we just become part of the problem. We become racist when we do that. Every one of us should have an opportunity, a chance, and then be judged based on how we respond, what our character, how we treat people, how honest are we, how much division, how hard do we work. Those things that really make a difference should be what we're defined on, not the other things that the left wants us to do.
Awesome. We're going to end on the Trump Tater slogan. Is to, I'll give you a sign, I'll take a sign, but we'll kind of come in and give the Trump Tater a hug. But a tater, if you look up the word tater in the dictionary, it also means a home run. And so a tater is somebody who does. And so the Trump Tater slogan, actually, I'm going to hold this one.
Okay.
I'm going to let you hold this one with
All
that
right.
hand. And we're going to come in and give the Trump Tater a big hug.
All right, let's do it.
And say our slogan. It's be a tater, not a hater.
Okay.
Ready? 1, 2. Be a tater, not a hater. Thank you very much for coming on.
Oh,
I
that's my
appreciate it.
pleasure. Thank you so much, Jamie. Appreciate it big time.